Wagwan pussies. Today you join me from the park, not the skate park this time because it's quite busy over there, and I wanted to do this video a bit more personally. I don't want loads of people listening into what I'm about to say because I put something on the community page last night asking which video you'd prefer to see me film today, and the majority of you said that you would like to see me film the life story homeless drug addict to my dream job, and today that's what we're going to do. So let's get straight into it. So this story begins when I was about 11 years old and I first started skateboarding. Now the reason why I got into skateboarding, like so many people in the early 2000s, was from Tony Hawk's games. It was Tony Hawk's American Wasteland for me. Obviously I played Underground and then I played every single one after that. One of my favorite game series of all time. Tony Hawk's American Wasteland, started playing that with my buddies and I was just like, dude, we need to try skateboarding. This is one of the coolest looking things ever. We eventually managed to convince our parents to get us like the cheapest board ever. I had a £30 Grind King board that I got from a supermarket called Co-op in England. It's very much equivalent to Walmart in the point that the boards are not very good at all. Now, my skateboarding at the start was absolutely terrible. I by no means was one of them skaters that just picked it up and was all of a sudden really good at doing stuff straight off the bat. That was not me in the slightest. I mean, still to this day, it takes me so long to learn things. And back then, I spent all day learning how to kick turn. I remember my friend learned it first, like super quickly. And instantly I was like, can't be having that. I've got to get this trick down as fast as possible. Spent all day learning it, did that. Then I eventually learned how to ollie, shove it, and then when I was trying kickflips, I would get advice from one of the local skaters at the time and just stand there and just attempt after attempt after attempt after attempt for like 12 hours straight. I was very much dedicated to get the trick, but it never did come that easy. I know a lot of you guys probably came from a similar sort of situation where your parents aren't really all there. Like my dad was very much passionate about his drugs, used to deal them himself, and I used to try and avoid and stay away from that as much as I possibly could. At that time, I was so anti-drug because I saw what it did to my father. My mother was an alcoholic at the time. Thankfully, she's all right now. My dad, no idea where he's at. So I spent most of my time at the skate park to avoid that. And even though my parents bought me the skateboard, I'm pretty sure my mum and dad went harsh because they could see how much I wanted to get into it. Neither of them, in fact, my dad definitely never believed in me. He never believed I could do anything. He was the kind of person that was very cynical. So I had a bet with him. He said to me, you'll never win a competition with that skateboard. You'll never be able to do anything with it. So I said, all right, cool. If I win a competition before I'm 16 years old, you pay me £100. And he was like, yep, 100% down for that. It's never gonna happen. So obviously at this point, I'm motivated. I'm training every day. I get my drop-ins, my kick flips, my tray flips. I get some grinds on the ledge. I was training my heart out for this. A local competition comes to the skate park in Leiston, and I was like, right, this is my moment. I've been training for this so long. I go into the under 16s category because I was 15 at the time, and I sweated my little heart out. I skated so hard that day, and actually managed to get into the final, was absolutely bricking it. So if you're someone that wants to get into competitions, just know that the anxiety is very much prevalent, especially for me, but you can feed off the competition atmosphere for sure. I got into the final, skated it, managed to get a tray flip, managed to get 50-50 down the ledge, a few board slide tricks on the rail, some basic stuff, but I managed to get away with the win. I'm stoked at this point, right? I go home to my dad, I'm like, Dad, I won the competition, I won the competition. I then said, remember that bet we had, we shook on it, you said you'd give me £100, I want to use that to buy a new skateboard. And he was just like, I ain't paying you. He's like, I ain't gonna give you shit. So he basically bet against me to the point where he said I would never win a competition. I then did everything I could to win that competition, to prove it, and didn't even get the reward. Obviously the euphoria from winning the competition was definitely enough for me, but it just would have been nice to know that the person that was raising me actually had any belief that I could do these things, you know? So yeah, so that was basically the home life. My dad used to smack me and stuff if I would ever ask for something like that. My mum did that too, but I feel like that was just something that happened a lot more often in the 2000s and stuff. Like parents were far more likely to give you a little bap if you were playing up, and I was definitely a kid that played up a lot. So I can see from both sides of the story, but I would say don't do that to your kids. You can catch more flies with honey than vinegar, for sure. And I've got no respect for that man. So that didn't really work very well for him, did it? All right, so now we're gonna move over to the fence over here, and I'm gonna talk to you probably about the deepest part of this entire story. And a few of you may know this already because I've mentioned it in previous videos, but when I was about 15, 16, My sister actually passed away from a drug overdose. Now, this was something that happened a couple days before Christmas Day. We found out on Christmas Day, and it really at the time, I used to tell myself it didn't really affect me, but no, I completely stopped going to school at the time. I literally just gave up completely on education. People used to say to me at school, what do you want to be? I would say a skateboarder, and they would say, what do you really want to be realistically? They were like, you need a backup plan. And I was like, if I have a backup plan, then I'm just going to take away energy from the thing that I want to do for my actual life, and that's just not what I want to do. And in hindsight, I think I was 100% right thinking like that, because yeah, it's good to have a backup plan if you don't truly believe your plan A can make it. But for me, I always had that like delusional belief that I would be able to do what I wanted to do, just because I knew that I wouldn't stop doing it until I made it to the point where I could do it professionally or earn money from it in that case. Now, obviously I'm not going to school, so I started skateboarding way more often. So I started going to the skate park when I should be going to school. They threatened my dad with taking him to court. It was so close to the end of my school term that he just ended up getting it dropped, and he was completely fine. Maybe he should have got in trouble, because he never really made me go to school. He was just like, yeah, just do what you want, all this, that, and the other. So I went skating all the time. And then one day I go visit my brother for like 3 or 4 days, and I come back and the house is completely empty. Dad's gone, dog's there on its own, and it's just literally nobody there apart from me and the dog. Next thing I know, I've got drug dealers banging down the door, because my dad basically like borrowed loads of money off them and loads of drugs, did them all, and then ran away. And I was just basically stuck in the house on my own with these drug dealers banging on the door. My mum was like, right, we can't have you staying there anymore, so we've got to get you out of there. And at this point, I didn't have a home. My mum had a boyfriend that was super abusive and didn't want me living with them. So my mum had no choice but to try and find me some of her friends to stay with. I stayed with a couple of my friends, but obviously this was not a permanent place that I could be residing. So I ended up on the streets for like a week, 2 weeks. I slept in a few doorways, and this was probably the roughest time. Even then I had hope that I would still be able to make something of myself. Like I started applying to college. I did eventually get into college, even though I didn't have any school grades. I got into like the most basic level of media. Started doing that, learning Photoshop. Still had no really idea what I wanted to do. I just knew it wanted to be skateboard related. And at this point I did manage to stay with my mum a little bit. I literally moved into her house with her abusive boyfriend, and he used to like, he was crazy, man. This guy was a mad drunk. Every single like parental figure I've been around has been an absolute nut job. Like he would come into my room in the house, pick up my TV, throw it if I connected to the internet. He was crazy, man. Like honestly, alcoholic father, stepfather, whatever it is, I would actually prefer a drug addict father to an alcoholic father. So I can really resonate with the kind of people that have an alcoholic stepfather, because even that brief period of my life with that guy was hell. I hated him with a passion. And we had such bad arguments that even now when I see him in the streets, like because he still lives in the same area as me, he shouts abuse at me, tells me to go get a haircut, just random dumb shit, you know? So I hate that guy with a burning passion. One of very few people that I do. But then shortly after this and that whole situation imploding, I then moved back to my hometown of Leiston, which is where I'm still at today. Now we're gonna move over to a different bench. I just didn't want to sit in one spot, you know, for the whole video. I feel like we've got to change the backdrop every now and then. Okay, so after I moved back to Leiston, this was when I really started, like all up until this time, I should probably point out, I was completely anti-drug. I saw what it did to my parents. I see what it did to my mum, everybody else. My mum was an alcoholic, but still a drug at the end of the day, innit? And yeah, I was so anti-drug at this point. But once I got back to Leiston, I literally got myself exactly into the same situation that they were in. A lot of my friends very much enjoyed doing drugs. They were like, oh, why don't you try this? This being cocaine. And at the time I was like, fuck it, I want something that's gonna help me actually feel something in life. I want something to get me excited. Tried it, and at that point, I was hooked. It started off by doing it once a week, then it came 2 times a week. I think the most I ever did it for was 14 nights in a row. And I hadn't slept for like 4 days, and this was the most delusional I've ever been. I remember laying on the floor of my friend's kitchen, just literally hallucinating like crazy just due to lack of sleep. I've never experienced anything like that in my entire life. Lack of sleep is probably the most dangerous out of all of them. But yeah, doing cocaine was definitely a big passion of mine at that point in life. Now at this point, I was living in a 1-bedroom flat with my mum. Tiny little flat. My mum had the bedroom, I had a mattress in the living room, and I was partying, nights out, clubbing, pubs, everything, spending every penny I had just to get high, just to do all sorts of crazy, nefarious stuff that you really don't want to know about in this video. But it went from the point where I was doing it with my friends and slowly spiraled down to the point where I was doing it in my room on my own. And you know that when you've taken the social aspect out of doing these things, that's when you've really hit rock bottom. Like, I wasted so much money, so much of my time on doing these things that, to be honest, if I could go back and change it, I probably wouldn't, because it led me to where I am today. But I would never want anyone else to fall into this kind of hole, which is why I'm sharing this story today, to teach you that no matter how bad things get, you can always come back. Because at that point, I was like 21 and I was very much deep into things up until the point where I was 24. Like, I spent so much money on drugs, it's ridiculous. Tens of thousands easily, and not to mention years of my life down the toilet. But at the end of the day, I guess it was a learning experience, but again, I could have probably learned that lesson in a lot shorter period of time and be younger doing what I'm doing now. But still, we're here today. But thankfully, that's not where the story ends. So shortly after this period, I had moved into a friend of mine's like shared house, and it was just a room in a giant B&B. His parents owned this massive B&B, so I was staying in that with them. And it was, again, a drug-fueled fiasco. We were just always getting on it. My friends always got on it as well, so we were very much in this together. But yeah, wasted so much money, so much time on the sniff, other drugs as well. Like, I never touched the stuff that my dad did. I never touched heroin. We just did like pills, MDMA, coke, stuff like that. Party drugs, basically. I never got into like crack or anything like that. So it didn't get to the deepest depths of the ocean that it could have, but it still was not in any way good for my health. And then this carried on till I was about 24. And at that point I met Holly. Holly was the person that actually helped me get through this stuff. Like, she accepted me for who I was, ignored my psycho ex-girlfriend at the time who was harassing both of us, because trust me, when you're in those circles, the kind of women that you attract, nut jobs. And trust me, I was probably a nut job at the time as well. It's just the scenarios and situation that we were in. But seriously, if Holly was one of those girls that heard all the bad stories and stuff that she was saying and then thought, no, I'm not touching that, I would probably still be in a very similar situation now to what I was then. I started skateboarding more, exercising more, got myself in shape, trimmed down doing like class A drugs to very rarely, once a fortnight to once a month. Fortnight is 2 weeks, by the way. Once every 2 weeks to once a month. And then just slowly phased that out of my life. Started smoking weed instead a lot more often to try and counteract or trade the addictions, which, why people say you shouldn't trade one addiction for another. If you can go from sniffing cocaine and spending all your money and life on that to smoking a bit of weed every now and then, I know which one I would rather be on, you know? So take that as you will. Not the best decision ever, but it definitely helped me get through it, that's for sure. Then the lockdown kicked in. Holly moved in with me very shortly after we got together. It was like 5 months into our relationship that she moved in, and honestly, if we didn't do that right before lockdown, God knows what would have happened. We maybe wouldn't have survived it. I'm sure we would have survived it, but you know, it always puts a strain on people's relationship if it's long distance, especially for such a long period of time. And at this point I decided, fuck it, if I'm ever going to get into skateboarding as a career, I've got to do something. I always wanted to do YouTube. I made YouTube videos when I was like 18, saw a tiny bit of success, like 1,000 subscribers, 1,000 or so views per video, and I thought, let's mix these two together. I've always loved video production, YouTube, skateboarding. How can we fuse this all together? Started on TikTok very early on in my TikTok career at the time. I managed to get 250,000 views on a short video, and at that point I was hooked. I was just like, yes, this is what I want to do. I want to do skateboarding full time, and I want to make videos on it to help people, which is how I started my career. Ended up doing TikTok for a while, got to 100,000 followers, 200,000 followers. At first I was making some dog shit videos, by the way. I'll put some of them on screen now. They were some of the worst, cringiest pieces of crap you've ever seen. But then we slowly got better, still getting better to this day. Eventually started YouTube, got a few sponsorship contracts, and we've just been on the grind ever since. Like, to go from that point where I was being bet against by my father, to being homeless in the doorway of the bookies just around the corner, to be where I am today. Sometimes I forget to look back and think about how blessed I am to be at this point, but just know that if you ever find yourself in any of the points, situations that I've talked about in this video, that you can get through them. You've just got to stick beside people you love, get yourself in the gym, exercise more, focus on you, think about what you want to do with life. And if you don't know yet, try everything you possibly can, figure out exactly what you don't want to do in life, process of elimination, you'll eventually find what you love. But anyway, that's pretty much my story right there. Now I'm pretty sure I still have some minor traumas that caused me to act out during my life with some of these things that have happened previously, but it's just all about healing over time, getting through these things, and honestly, with the help of the YouTube community that have helped lift me up and give me a purpose of just making videos and skateboarding and helping people, I honestly couldn't be happier with where I am right now. And now I've got the girl of my dreams that I honestly couldn't be happier with, and we traveled the world together, skateboarding, helping people, and sharing stories like this in the hopes that it can inspire some of you guys to know that if you're not in such a good position, you can get out of it. You just got to work hard, stay focused, and learn from your mistakes is the biggest point I can put across in this video. Anyway, that's my story. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know some of yours in the comments because I'd love to read them, and I'll see you guys in the next one.